Welcome to a new episode of Coming Clean's, a safe space to bring awareness to addiction, depression, and mental illness, or simply to any social taboo. This is a platform intended to help those interested in a journey from darkness into the light of self-reconstruction. If you listen to the similarities instead of the differences, you will eventually hear a story from one of our guests that will guide you to the life of freedom. And here we are today with Diana
Yes.
Lim.
Diana Min.
Min. My apologies. How
It's
are you,
okay.
Diana?
I'm
It's
doing
so
well.
good to see you.
So good to be here. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you for coming.
Oh,
I'm gonna do your quick intro because actually the way you and I connected was through social media.
Right.
I saw one of your posts, your posts on about a journey that you're doing.
Yes.
Actually, your journey.
Yes.
And I reached out to you, and I was so fascinated by your story that I asked you to come on.
Yeah.
Let me read a little bit about your bio so we know who you are, where you come from.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Diana is a native. Diana is a native of New York City. Her spiritual journey started growing up in a Buddhist temple at the age of 5 years old. Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. However, during that process, she was suffering from unimaginable abuse in her private home. Diana's addiction to alcohol and drugs developed very quickly as she tried to escape the painful reality of her upbringing, as well as her intense anxiety, depression, PTSD, borderline personality disorder. These issues hunted her into adulthood, where addiction intensified and brought with them very unfortunate traumatic circumstances. I slowed down because your story is a story of a lot of pain. It's not easy to read this.
Yeah.
At 26 years old, Diana suffered a mental breakdown, which led her to seek a shamanic healer, who eventually led her to ayahuasca, a sacred plant medicine from the Amazon jungle that has been used in ancient cultures for over 5,000 years. After her first ceremony, Diana was able to break free from all addictions and eventually heal herself, all of her mental ailments. Since then, she has continued to spread the message of incredible healing plant medicine to the masses. Today, Diana organizes sacred plant medicine ceremonies in Southern California and continues to work in holistic healing modalities like yoga, meditation, Reiki, and is very passionate supporter of self-healing.
Yes.
Wow, what a journey.
Yes, it was.
What a journey. Diana, you grew up in a monk temple.
Yeah, well, so basically, instead of my mom finding a babysitter, she would just drop me off at our Buddhist temple. So, I mean, as much as I was like running around, I was in this monastery basically with monks every summer, all summer, and then every weekend during the school year, in which I learned how to read and write in Thai, how to pray and meditate and do Thai arts and crafts. So it's basically like a Hebrew school, but it was like a Thai school and a Buddhist Thai school.
And this was in New York?
This was in New York, yeah,
Okay.
Long Island.
Okay, wow. Yeah. Okay, so are you an only child?
No, I have an older sister. It's just the two of us.
And your mom was a single mother, or?
No. My parents were together for the majority of my life. They're both immigrants here from Thailand. They originally lived in Astoria, Queens, and then eventually moved out to Brentwood, Long Island. And they are both victims of severe childhood abuse themselves. Something that I've come to really understand about Thai culture is that physical abuse is a very common thread. It's very part of the culture of how you raise your children, unfortunately.
That's not only Thai cultures. That's very, very common in my culture as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So my parents, they're trying to do their best here in America and raise kids and provide for us. And I'm extremely grateful for all that they've sacrificed. Unfortunately, they suffered their own mental illnesses and disorders and trauma and anxiety and things like that. So it was just a subsequent consequence that we would then be, put through similar
Tell me about your
situations.
childhood. Tell me about you growing up at 5 years old, going to the temple. How did your thinking started developing? How did you What was your formation? What was your thoughts? What was it that drove you to where you at today?
So, I mean, I grew up believing very much in spirits, in energy, right? And my mom is a devout woman of the temple because she has, she's bipolar and she has all these, chemical imbalances. And she was always desperately seeking some sort of guidance or solace in that place. So I grew up just really hearing all these stories about, monks that would meditate and transcend to different places, different lifetimes, and different dimensions, or monks that have been in car accidents and completely walked out unscathed because they protected themselves in their own white light of aura protection, and just like these insane stories of just the mystical world, So I really grew up believing in that. And then also when my mother would have these very violent episodes where she would blame them on these spirits that would take over her body, or things that she would do to us that she'd be like, oh, I didn't do it. These dark entities came into me and caused me.
Give us an example of that.
Well, a lot of times when she would be abusive towards us, and it would be extreme, times where, being a young child, to never feel safe, to never feel like to have any solace, or to feel just always in danger. You're always in survival mode. And so my mother has done extremely horrible things that I don't blame her for, and I don't want to demonize her in any way, because she was suffering, but
Hurt people hurt people.
Right. And so, I mean, she would essentially waterboard me in the shower, essentially, like with the kind of the shower head. So it's like you're just unable to breathe. I've been left outside, like stripped to my underwear for hours, as like a young child. Just a lot of violence, and then because my sister was being abused also by my mother, so then my sister would abuse me when no one was around.
So this was a cycle that was repeated.
Right. So I was getting it from all sides because
Mm-hmm.
I was the baby, and so it was a very, very dark childhood. It was. I don't know how I survived. I wanted to kill myself many times. At 8 years old, I wanted to kill myself. 10 years old, I tried. 13 years old, I continued to want to escape this reality that I lived in.
Under that reality, under that amount of stress that you were living, under those conditions, what was your outlet besides the temple? I mean, what did you seek for? And that's the first part of the question. And then my second part of the question: when did that outlet turn into drugs and alcohol?
I think my outlet at the time was writing. I would fill journals up with because I was scared to speak, right? Like I had this huge personality, and I had all this expression that I wanted to, release, but I was always, condemned and told that I was stupid and I was dumb and I was retarded and stop acting like that. Why are you doing that? And so I became like a silent child, and I was extremely scared to be myself. So I just would fill up these notebooks and these journals with poems and writing, and just trying to find this way to express myself in this private way. And then, I mean, luckily I grew up in the age of AOL, and so I had, AOL Instant Messenger, and so I would be able to message with my friends and that lived in other places, and, my friends from Temple really were a huge support, even though they didn't know what I was going through, because I kept it very private, because, in our Thai community, it's, you don't air out your dirty laundry to other people, and so everything was very private, and on the surface, everything looked like it was good.
At what point did that become so unbearable that you started seeking
alcohol? So I had my first drink probably when I was maybe 15 years old, maybe 14 or 15. And it was the first time that I was able to escape my reality. And it was the first time that I had felt this just heavy, dense energy just kind of lift from my chest for a second, and felt like I could actually be free for a second and breathe. And it just quickly turned from that point. It was always like my go-to. I was drinking from 15 and on. And it would usually be like after like an abusive episode or something that would happen to me, and I would just kind of go out and try to like numb myself.
So you would actually leave the house. This was not something you were doing at your house.
Yeah.
This was something that you had found a way to.
Yeah. I mean, at 15, you kind of have friends that are older that can like pick you up
Sure.
and take you somewhere, anywhere. And so it's like I was drinking, I was, smoking weed, which, I mean, in my community is very regular to be smoking weed at 15, and drinking at 15. But yeah, I mean, it turned into hard drugs like much later, like probably like when I got to college. Because when I turned 17, basically my father ended up going to jail. The violence between him and my mother got very intense, and he ended up getting arrested for attempted murder. And at that point, like my entire whatever semblance of structure that I had left at that point completely just crumbled. And my mother, she dropped the charges. She moved out of the house within 3 days. I remember that day, it was a Wednesday, and she had like packed her stuff up in garbage bags, and she just said, "Your dad will be out on Saturday, I'll call you," and left the house. And I was just there by myself, like had no idea what to do.
How old were you then?
I was 17 at this point. And my sister was in college, so I was there by myself, and I just completely I just crumbled. I just collapsed into myself. I was extremely smart. I was, honors classes, all that. I just stopped going to school. I just gave up on my life for like about a year until, I've had amazing angels that have really protected me and guided me throughout my life. I had a guidance counselor that was just like, "You're ranked 26 in like a 1,000 graduating class, like you're extremely smart. Why aren't you going to college? What are you doing? Where have you been? Like what's going on?" And I just remembered it was the first time anybody had asked me how I was doing.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and I just remember I just completely broke down, and I don't even think I made words. I don't think I even said anything. And he just held space for me, and he said, okay. And he let me go, and he applied to a bunch of colleges for me.
Wow.
And he paid for my application fees, and all of a sudden I just started getting all of these acceptance letters. And I picked a college, I drove myself upstate, and I just never looked back. But obviously my addictions continued to snowball very heavily into my colleges, because now I'm just like, I escaped, I have no one looking after me, and now it's like drugs and drinking is the norm, the culture of college life. Sure. And many terrible situations happened in that place as well. I mean, I got a DWI at the age of 20. I got into many of my relationships at this point had been abusive, because I was attracting that, right?
And you were repeating the pattern.
Exactly.
You were repeating the pattern.
Right. So I was in an abusive relationship. We were at a bar. He poured a drink on my head, and I was blacked out drunk, and I picked up a pint glass and I smashed it over his head, and he got 32 stitches. I got a second-degree assault charge, and I spent the night in prison. And so there are many signs of just being like telling me that I had a problem, but I couldn't grasp it at the time. I really couldn't understand like what was happening.
What was that defining moment when you realized that you needed to do something? What happened? What was your bottom, as we call it in recovery? What was your bottom?
I've had many bottoms that I refuse to accept as bottoms, but in that kind of in that era, I guess, of my addiction, it was that moment. I was, banned from all the bars and shunned from my entire campus of friends and social life. And I sat home, and I was just like, I really had to look at myself. And then I took some mushrooms, actually. And it was the first time I was able to kind of take this aerial view, kind of have that outer body experience, right, where I saw that I had literally been carrying my parents' pain and violence and trauma into myself and into my relationships. And it was like wow, like I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be this person. This is not who I am. I knew at my core it wasn't who I am. And so I went to study abroad in London, and I started reading books. I started reading Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. I started meditating, but I mean, none of that would actually really deter me from drinking or doing drugs just yet. I then, after graduation, I moved back to New York City.
I'm going to ask you to
Yeah.
pause for a second.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your mushroom story.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to know about that is because you said something that's very interesting and that the audience is going to be very interested in. You said you had an aerial view of what spirituality looked like, and you were able to mirror what was happening in your household, able to understand from a
Right.
spiritual point of view how you were repeating the cycle. What was it during that experience that led you to feel that way, that you were actually experiencing something?
What I saw visually was, it was like I had hiked down to the crevices of my soul, and I had turned over these rocks that were the components of my being, and I had saw all of this pain and all of this trauma and all of these experiences, all these memories, all of this tragedy that I had been energetically holding,
Yeah.
carrying,
Yes.
clinging to.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I just wanted to release it. I just wanted to release it. I didn't want to bring it with me forward into.
And I
my
think what
path.
many of us don't understand, that we don't only carry that negative energy that we inherently inherit from our parents, but we carry that negative energy we carry from multi-generations.
Yes.
Our parents' parents, our
Mhm.
parents' parents' parents, and so forth and so forth.
Yeah.
That vicious cycle of dysfunction continues from one generation to another.
Right.
And is very seldom that someone's able to find to be able to see that.
Mhm.
Okay, somebody has to go through a really traumatic experience to be able to see, wow, this is where all this is coming from. So what happened? Continue to tell.
Well, I moved back to New York City, and I started, working, hustling in New York, and continuing to just be, very having fun with my addictions, right? Drinking, partying, living that flashy New York City life, and just being at all the greatest parties, hanging with celebrities, and thinking I was on top. I had an amazing job. I was making tons of money, going on vacations 3 times a year, like buying bags and shoes, and finding all these external things to fill this void that was in my soul, and thinking that was it, And I continued to do this for many years, in situations that were extremely unfortunate that happened. I had been drugged and raped twice during those years in New York City. Both times in which I didn't remember until I went into ayahuasca ceremonies, and my subconscious mind brought those memories back into my conscious mind. And situations that I've lost many jobs from my alcoholism.
Listen, you touch about the ayahuasca ceremony, and that is one of the key points, one of the main points why we're here
gonna
today.
get to that. Absolutely.
And we're going to get to that here in a
Yeah.
minute. But I want to know how your journey to recovery started. When did it click? What happened? Your bottom and your turning point. Because you have said a lot of things that people would hear your story, they would not imagine that you're a beautiful woman, highly intelligent, educated, that has overcome a lot of challenges that most people will not overcome if they don't seek a deep connection with themselves
Right.
and do a lot of work to do that. And you've done all of that.
Yeah.
You have experienced things that most people have not,
Right.
both the positive and the negative.
Right. Well, what do they say? The lower you go, the higher you rise, right? And so, for me, I think to answer your question was when I turned 26. I had a mental breakdown. I was in my apartment in New York City. Externally, was succeeding, but internally, I wanted to die. Like, I could not stop crying. Like, I just felt like I wanted to rip my skin off, and I just wanted to disappear. And I just had this intuition of contacting this shamanic healer that lived in Brooklyn. I never talked to her before. I had her number in my phone for about a year. And I called her on the phone, and she picks up. We have a conversation. I'm talking to this stranger. I'm just crying on the phone. I'm like, I just don't want to live. And she's just like, well, when you're ready to come see me, I'm in Brooklyn. And it took me about a month. I went to go see her, and she looked at me, and she's like, wow, you have so much pain. And I honestly couldn't even afford her at the time, and she's very expensive.
How did you know to call her? Why her?
I didn't know. I had no idea. I was just being called. I felt a deep, just like I had her number for a year in my phone, and it was literally just healer. Like
Okay.
I had no idea what her name was. I just got my girlfriend, like from one of the clubs I worked at, just like gave it to me a long time ago. I just called her. And so I went to go see her about a month later, and she looked at me, she was like, you have so much pain. I know you can't really afford me, but I need to work with you anyway. I feel called to help you. And I was deeply grateful. So within those 6 months, I would do intense energy work with her. And I mean, she's a shamanic healer, right? So she's working on an energetic, quantum, multidimensional level, where we did soul retrievals, where it's like, when you go through so much trauma as a being, your soul will actually detach itself and hide itself in other dimensions to preserve itself from being destroyed. And so I had so many holes in my aura, in my field, in my soul. So we had to do a lot of that. We had to do a lot of past life regressions and really understanding, like, the wound between me and my mother had started many lifetimes ago, in which, you know, I was like a master of martial arts in a Tibetan monastery, and she was always an afflicted woman. Or in one life, I was her son, and she had abandoned me. And this wound I've been chasing her through lifetimes, trying to heal and really, really closing that. There's so many. I mean, there's a lot of just multi-dimensional aspects that if you're not really like well versed in that, can seem a little fucking crazy.
Well, sure.
But
sure.
I mean, having experienced this, I mean, there was a point during the 6 months with her where I had looked out into the world and something had changed. Like a veil had just fell. And it was like realizing that I had been seeing the entire world through this lens of fear and survival. And it was almost like I can feel this energy of fear, like floating out of my mouth, like I could taste it. And somebody asked me, what does fear taste like, Diana? It tastes like somebody throwing staplers at your head while you're crouched down in a corner. That's what it tastes like. And it was an entire just reality shift where I'm like, wow, like I don't have to fight for my life right now. Like I don't have to attack every single person that it's just like, wow, I can just exist and be at peace. And so within 6 months of that, I'm in another relationship at this point, which had gotten abusive at certain points. But because I lived with him, I had nowhere to go. So that was unfortunate. But I was kind of stuck in this situation. So we went into an ayahuasca ceremony. I remember.
When you say we, you and your
me and my partner at the time, right?
Okay.
Went into an ayahuasca ceremony.
And for those in the audience that do not know what an ayahuasca ceremony is, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, so basically ayahuasca is a combination of two separate plants found in the Amazon jungle, the ayahuasca vine and the trachuna leaf. And so it's made into this brew that's been made the same way for 5,000 years. It's been used by all ancient civilizations, from the Incans, the Mayans, the Aztecs, like any ancient civilization that you can think of has had some sort of plant medicine in which they take to venture into the spiritual world for deep healing and deep connection with spirit. And so, I mean, even if you've watched the movie Avatar, the tree in which they plug into, that's ayahuasca. If you've seen the movie Black Panther, the purple plant in which they ingest to go into the spiritual world, that's ayahuasca. So it's been weaved into our culture in ways that people aren't even aware of, but it's very apparent that we need to have this connection to our plants because we come from this earth. We are products of this world. You know, we are made of stars, we're made of dirt. And so when they're living beings. Yes. Like we are. Absolutely. And so a ceremony is usually facilitated by a shaman and maybe his partner, depending. And it's very sacred. It's not something to take lightly. It's not something to buy off Amazon and do it on your own, which I know people do. It's something to really be sure who you're sitting with and the person facilitating it, and make sure that they're of integrity and are, really doing it with love. That's probably the most important thing. And so, my first ceremony was in this tiny Brooklyn apartment with this little Jewish man named Isaac. And it was the moment that changed my life for me. The evening that changed my life, because I took my first cup and I fell into this rabbit hole, and I just kept falling through these layers of your being. You're just like and it was like, again, getting this aerial view, right? But not only just with me, but I'm with God. I'm seeing myself in the maze of my life as if I was a little lab rat, and every obstacle that had been placed in my path, and every, traumatic event that I experienced was strategically placed there for me, for my benefit, for my growth, for my expansion. And really understanding that I needed to be grateful for all of it, and realizing how ungrateful I had been for my life at that point, and how I didn't value my life, and how deeply shamed I was for not being appreciative of every breath that I take, and the experiences that I've had in my life, as painful as they were gifts.
Absolutely, and I don't want to interrupt your passion, because you're so
please.
passionate about the way you talk, and I love listening to you. But it's so important to realize that most of us only focus on the negative that is happening in that particular moment.
Right.
And we get lost in that, and that's what drives us into insanity.
Absolutely.
That's what drives us into cycles of dysfunction. That's what drives us. If we are able to alter that state and realize that that's just a moment, it's an event, it's not our life, it's not who we are.
Right.
And you have done such a beautiful job in your transformation. You talk with a lot of compassion. You talk with a lot of assertiveness, a lot of self-secureness. You never have said anything negative about your parents or your childhood. It's just an experience that you went through, because you have a greater appreciation for life today.
Absolutely.
And I love that, and I appreciate that. Now, why would somebody with an addiction, and I'm going somewhere with this,
Yes,
okay?
yes.
Why would somebody with an addiction will go out, because there's going to be somebody in the audience that's going to say, ayahuasca,
Yeah,
that's a drug.
it's not.
Okay, so why don't you tell us why would somebody will go through that experience and exactly what it is?
Right. So it's not a drug, it's medicine. And for me, like, what a drug looks like or is something chemically man-made. This is from Mother Earth. This is a gift that has been given to us humans to be medicine, to help us cure ourselves of the psychosis of the ego, of the mind, of mental ailments, PTSD, borderline personality disorder, addictions. And essentially what ayahuasca is able to do for people with addictions is actually to go into your brain and rewire the neurons that cause you to act in the ways that you do when something goes wrong, when you're stressed, when you're having an issue, or you're dealing with whatever issue that makes you turn to alcohol, that makes you turn to drugs, that makes you feel like you can't cope. It's a hardened neurotic pattern in your brain. And what ayahuasca actually does, the chemicals actually goes into your brain and rewires those hardened pathways. And when you see it on like a brain scan, because there's so many universities, so many doctors like all over Europe, South America, even here in California, that are studying the effects of ayahuasca on patients that are suffering from these ailments.
Has been there for years.
Yeah. They can see how it actually changes the brain
Lights up your
chemistry.
brain. Absolutely.
And changes the way that you see something, And so for me and for a lot of people, I've seen, not only have I cured myself of alcoholism and drug addiction and borderline personality disorder and PTSD, but I've seen people that have been on antidepressants their entire life completely just get off of them within a couple ceremonies and live happily for the rest of their life without it. And so we don't need all of these pills and all of these Western, drugs that are just making people more sick and making people deeper into addiction. because ayahuasca and many other ayahuasca is only one of the plant medicines that, most tribes in the jungle work with, but there are many other plant medicines that can cure so many diseases. But it doesn't make the pharmaceuticals that much money, so they don't want to talk about it.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about your first experience. So you have the first experience.
Yeah.
You go to the first ceremony, and then what happens? Were you immediately healed after that?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. So for me and for a lot of people, coming into your first ceremony is like a shaking of hands, right? It's like meeting like God's spirit, the Mother Ayahuasca, whatever you want to call it, for the first time, and kind of coming in and being like, okay, like I'm ready to do the work. And when I got out of my first ceremony, I end up getting into a second ceremony a month later by divine alignment, right? I meet someone at a random place. They go, do you want to drink? I'm like, actually, I can't drink anymore. They're like, why not? I'm like, well, ever since I did this thing called ayahuasca, I can't drink anymore. Light bulb. This woman organizes ayahuasca ceremonies. Just divine alignment, right? So she invites me to a second ayahuasca ceremony within a month of my first. I get into that ceremony, and at this point, my relationship with the medicine, I didn't really understand the fact that like she communicates with you, she talks to you, you get intuitions, you get downloads, you get all of this inner, deeper knowledge, but you just think that you're just thinking these random thoughts. And so I had this thought that my relationship needed to end, and that sucked, and I'm crying and I'm mourning that. And then I got this thought that I'm gonna move to California. And so I felt this sun shining on me, and I heard the ocean waves, and I grazed my hand across the sand, and I was like, wow, that feels beautiful. Thought nothing of it. Went back into my life, tried to make it work with my boyfriend. A week later, I got fired from my job. A week after that, me and my ex-boyfriend get into the biggest physical fight that ended us, basically. And I had to move out. And so I'm like looking for apartments in New York City. And I'm like so depressed. I'm just like, I'm destroyed. And I remember I was like in fetal position, locked in my office. And this hand just like took a life of its own and started just kind of grazing over my head. And this voice came to me and she said, I love you. I will never leave you. And you're going to be okay. And in that moment, I just sat up and I thought, hey, I visited San Diego 2 years ago and I really liked it. And I remember I stayed at an Airbnb with this girl and she was really nice and I have her phone number. So I texted her. I'm like, hey, girl, let me know if you know anybody looking for a roommate because I'm looking to move. She's like, I'm looking for a roommate. And again, divine alignment, she had some emergency construction happen at her place. She needed to move out ASAP. And within 3 weeks of that conversation, I had an apartment in San Diego. I had no money at the time. I took out a credit card for my ex's furniture. It was $3,500. He paid me out cash on it. And it cost me exactly $3,500 to move, like, to the dollar. Like, it was insane. It was the easiest move of my life. I got here. She did Airbnb. She had furniture for me. I sat on my bed. I looked out the window. I'm like, what the fuck just happened to me? What the fuck? I just felt like I floated out of there, and I just landed here, and I was like, okay, time to figure out the rest of my life. And it just continued. My life has continued to roll out that way because I have completely surrendered to this divine life force that is always guiding us, that's always protecting us, it's always showing us, but it takes real work to receive these messages and to listen to it and to trust it, And so it's been 4 years since my journey with ayahuasca. I've sat in about 40 ceremonies at this point, and the work is never done because we are multi-layered beings, and I've continued to work and heal myself of all of my wounds and all of my trauma. And, and every time I think I'm like, I'm completely healed and I'm perfect now and I'm going to heal other people, she like knocks me on my ass. She's like, oh, really? Well, let's look at this layer. And I'm like, oh, shit, I didn't know that was underneath there.
But overall, there has been a tremendous transformation.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
100%.
where is the Diane today from the 5-year-old Diane? Who is she?
Wow. I have completely given myself over to God, like to spirit, to the powers that be, this divine life force. I completely trust in my divine purpose on this earth is to not only have healed myself and to go through these experiences, not for myself, but for others. I'm in a complete space of wanting to be in service and wanting to share this gift of healing with others, because I know there's so many people out there still suffering. I know there's so many people still out there still lost, still suicidal, still in addictions, all that stuff. And I'm in my purpose, and my divine life purpose is to be here to shine a light that it's like, hey, it's possible, and I can help you, and I want to help you, and I want to show you not only just maybe not in the way that I did it, because maybe ayahuasca is not for you, but just as a ray of light of hope that it is possible, that happiness is possible, and you can come back to your natural state of being, which is love.
Absolutely. We are born without any predestined negativism in us.
Right.
All of that is adopted
Mm-hmm.
from what we inherit from our environments and the energies that we bring forward from our ancestors. But we are born pure. We are born clean. We are,
Right.
And suddenly we get to a point in our lives where everything shifts.
Mm.
Is it that everything shifts or we shift?
Oh man, we definitely shift, because everything is just is. It's our thoughts about. It's not what happens to us. It's our thoughts about what happens to us that cause our suffering. It's the lies that we tell ourselves that cause our suffering. Everything is as it just is. But then our ego comes into it, and then we judge things like, this is a bad experience, this is a good experience. It just is.
Yeah.
So absolutely we shift. And it's a growing of the spiritual awareness, of the self-realization that really is the next level of evolution, and really coming into connection.
Diana, knowing what you know today, what will you tell that 5-year-old little girl that she could do different today?
Oh, I have to actually talk to her all the time, because I have a lot of inner child
Absolutely.
work that I have to continue to heal with her. Oh man, I would tell her that she's safe. And
She was always safe.
She wasn't always safe. Physically, she wasn't always safe, to be real. But that I'm going to continue to protect her, and I'm going to continue to take care of her. I'm going to continue to guide her, nurture her, and allow her to be a child, and allow her to be herself, and allow her to play and be joyful, and give her, and really give her that space to be in her true state.
How's your relationship with your mother today?
It's good. It's good. She's actively working on healing herself. She's continuing to suffer different physical ailments due to her, emotional trauma. So, she has vertigo now. She, when you have emotional pain and energetic, just like downtrodden's like that, it manifests in itself in the physical body.
Absolutely.
And
It poisons the body.
Right.
Poisons the body.
Right.
And why has your mother not done the journey herself?
Because they don't have. I don't think they have the balls to do it. To be honest, it takes a real one. You gotta really come in there like, I'm ready to do this work. Like, I'm ready to really give my all to this transformation.
And that is the point. That is the point, and that's the reason I wanted to ask you that.
Right.
Because it is something that when you do an experience like that, you give it all of yourself. Mm-hmm. There's no holding back. Mm-hmm. There is no, I can't keep any secrets for myself. Mm-hmm. I'm going to reveal myself. I'm going naked. I'm going all out. You're going to see exactly who I am and who I want to become.
Right.
But I would think that someone seeing your change, seeing your transformation would be curious,
Yeah.
Because most of us, we don't do what people tell us to do. We do what we see people doing.
Right.
And I would think that your mom seeing the woman that you have become will be curious about this journey. I know that I got curious about the journey when you and I talked, and I've been researching it for a long time, and it's something that I want to do and I want to experience. Now, what else do you do besides the ceremonies. What else do you do to heal your body, your mind, your being? What are your rituals?
Well, on a daily basis, I meditate morning and night and really try to keep my connection with Source and keep my channel clear so that I can continue to receive, my intuitions, receive my messages, my visions that I get. I've grown so much more in my capability to just be more intuitive and be just more empathic in my being. So that's a practice that I really hold dear daily. I do yoga daily because that is a meditation in motion, when you're in your body. And a lot of times, as much as we are spiritual beings, our bodies are still parts of us, and our body will actually hold trauma in these different areas. So when you're opening up your body and you're doing yoga, you're actually stretching into the energetic parts of yourself that don't normally get stretched and releasing these energetic clogs and these blockages in your body. And a lot of people go to yoga and they're like, why do I want to cry at the end of yoga? I'm like, it's good. You need to release that. That and that's super important. I mean, just being active, and continuing. I mean, I completely am sober of all things. I mean, I used to continue to smoke like marijuana here and there, but I've completely eradicated that too, because marijuana actually clouds your connection, your third eye. And so my visions and my intuition comes out so much more clear now that I've stopped doing that as well.
So you're completely sober?
Completely sober,
And
yes.
how long has that been?
4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
Completely sober of all alcohol and drugs for 4 years. Marijuana, it's been about 3 months now. Yeah, so that was a hard one to give up because, sometimes you just want to relax. But now it's just like, people ask me like, how are you doing it? I'm like, I am high off life.
Absolutely.
All the time.
Yeah.
I am just super.
That's me right here.
Yes, I feel that. I feel that. Because when you really do the work and you really find that deeper connection to something greater than you, and you find that love for yourself, that is all the high that you need, And so and it's so funny because people are like, oh, you're not having fun at the party and you're not doing. I'm like, I'm the last one standing at the party.
Absolutely.
You guys are all passed out drunk.
Yeah.
I'm the only one. I remember everything. I'm still dancing. I got all this energy. I'm not going to be hungover tomorrow. I love it. It's a great life. I feel like my life really started 4 years ago with my first ayahuasca ceremony, with being sober, because the life before that was a dream, It was a foggy existence. It was a heavy, dense, foggy existence. Yeah.
Slow death.
Yeah.
Tell me, are those ceremonies legal?
Technically, no.
Okay.
Yeah, technically.
And they take place?
Many different places.
Okay.
Yeah, luckily we're very close to Mexico, so sometimes they'll be down there in Rosarito on a beautiful mountain, cliffside. Sometimes they're in people's homes that are donated.
Why would something that has such a tremendous impact on a person's individual, on a person's well-being, will not be legal?
Because it allows you to think for yourselves. It frees you. Anything that allows you to think for yourself and frees you from the confines that society puts on you of what the expectations of what you think you should be and what you should be doing and makes you fall in line is going to be illegal, because they don't want you to think for yourself. They don't want you to be free. They don't want you to be an independent, sovereign being, They don't want that. And so, unfortunately, actually Berkeley just legalized it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So that's a start. That's a start.
Boy, this is a fascinating topic, and we could go to many places with it. There's so much research that has been done. Interestingly enough, one of the founders of the leading 12-step program experimented with ayahuasca, experimented with LSD, experimented with many psychedelics. So this is something that has been in research for a long time, and the government has stopped a lot of the researchers many a times, has banned them across many universities. They had legalized cannabis in many places for both medicinal purposes and recreational purposes. Do you believe that at some point ayahuasca ceremonies would be legal in the States?
I mean, I would like to hope so, and with all the research behind it, with all the the amazing experiments and tests that are showing the healing properties of this plant, I would love to hope so, but I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe I would like to be hopeful and say maybe yes, it is a possibility in the far future, but
In your opinion, somebody struggling with drugs, with alcohol, with any type of addiction, this would certainly be an outlet for them to look into.
Absolutely, yes. And it's not just even finding a ceremony circle around you, or going to Peru, but there are rehab centers now, not in America, that utilize plant medicine as a forms of rehabilitation. And so, yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend you do your research and make sure whoever you're going to sit with and whatever circle you're joining is of integrity, and making sure that you kind of talk to someone that's kind of been there before. Because I mean, even me, I've had experiences with people and going into ceremonies where I didn't really know the shaman, I didn't really know the facilitator, and realizing that it was not of love, and it was more like it wasn't the best experience. But luckily I'm strong, and I held my own, and I have my own relationship with the medicine now. But yeah, just be careful. There's people that are taking advantage of this newfound hype around it. There's people that are just saying that they serve medicine all of a sudden to go on their retreat in Peru, and I just be careful, please.
So this is certainly something you don't go to Amazon and do. You don't search out somebody in the internet and do the experience with.
Yeah, don't just search out make sure that there are reviews. Make sure that you can talk to someone that's been through that experience and can give you firsthand, feedback on it. But I mean, I've gone to the jungle in Peru, I've gone to the mountains in Peru, and I've sat with amazing, amazing leaders there.
Tell us a little bit about the ceremony itself.
Okay.
Okay, so we show up.
Yeah.
And what happens?
Okay, so you show up to the location, wherever that may be, and so you want to bring with you a yoga mat, a sleeping bag, a pillow or two, a small bucket, a bucket, small container, maybe with a lid, preferably, and something to wipe your face with, whether it's tissues or a cloth or something, and some water. And so you would set up your spot, and it's almost like you're setting up for a yoga class, and you'd be up against the walls, right? So you kind of everybody's kind of in their space.
Okay.
And then the shaman will open up the ceremony and do his opening prayers, and he's doing prayers to protect the space. Because when you're opening up your energy and your soul in that way, there is a possibility, and this is why it's very important to be careful who you sit with, that other energies can actually come into the space. And so the shaman needs to protect the space, protect the area, and then he opens it up and he offers everyone their first cup. And so then we sit in a silent...
Is it a tea process?
It's a tea, yeah.
Okay.
It's a tea. It's literally just like a tea made from a plant and a vine. And so everybody takes their first cup, and then we sit in silent meditation for about 45 minutes to an hour, in which the medicine will start to really kick in. And the shaman, and my particular shaman that I work with, is a pure wizard. If you guys really think that wizards don't exist, they do, because he is a pure wizard, and he will just know when it is to, and these different chants and different so they're called icaros, which is medicine songs that actually communicate with the plant inside of you, that will activate it in its journey through the evening, right? So as he's singing these songs, he could be playing guitar, he could be playing jungle food, he could be playing harp, maracas. It's literally tribal jungle music, and it's so amazing and it's so beautiful. And you start going on your journey. And the thing, it's hard to describe what one person's ceremony is like, because every single person's ceremony is so different. I've sat in 40 ceremonies, and not one of them have ever been the same. And everybody else that has come to sit in ceremonies with me, maybe just as long, same deal. Not one of them is ever the same. So it's hard to base your experience off one person's experience, because your experience is going to be based on who you are, where you are in your journey, your soul path, your ancestry, your everything you've experienced, you know, your whole life. So, and what the concentration is of that particular ceremony. I've gone into ceremonies where the entire concentration of that ceremony was about me healing for my ancestors and all of my ancestors' pain and all of their trauma being purged through my body. And so I want to talk about the purge because that's a big thing that people are concerned about, this purge. So yes, there is a vomiting that happens, but it's not the vomiting that you think of when you're drunk and you're vomiting and you feel sick and it's painful and it's terrible. It is the most exhilarating feeling and experience, and sometimes you're not even there. Sometimes you're in a deep portal where you're purging things from, again, like not in this dimension, not in this lifetime. And so it's so liberating to then release these things. Sometimes you're purging things and you can taste that it's ancient, that it's not, and it's been sitting at the bottom pits of your being for centuries, maybe for decades, maybe. Something like, I purged something the other day that was for me hitting my ex-boyfriend on the head with a pint glass. Like, that was like 12 years ago, but it was, the shame was sitting at the bottom pits of my being, and when I purged it, I can taste how stale it was, that it was ready to be released, you know? And so, and you'll come out of this purge, whether it's through vomiting or through going to the bathroom, you know, having, you know, having exit the other way, or shaking, crying, like all of that is an energetic purge. And when you come out of this purge, you feel so much lighter. You feel like you have new skin. You feel like released. You feel free, you know? And whereas if you went in there like we don't realize how much we carry. We get so used to carrying it. We don't even feel the weight of it until it's taken off. And you're like, wow. Like, it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. And yeah, sometimes you'll kind of take a roller coaster ride through your life where she's just going to show you things. She's just going to show you, let's look at this experience again. Let's look at this moment in your childhood. Let's look at what your parents went through to get there before they had you. Let's walk through your grandparents' shoes. It is so different depending on your intention. And so always we want to set an intention going into ceremony, because we're a co-creation of the ceremony. You ask her, she wants to know what you want. She wants to give it to you, you know? And so, but then sometimes it's like, well, I want this. And then she'll be like, you don't ask for things, I give you things. And so it's kind of like you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, where do we go from here? I mean, this has been so deep and profound. Diana, tell us a little bit about your educational background. You graduated from
SUNY New Paltz. So I graduated from a state college in New York. I originally was an English major, but I switched last minute to communications and did an English minor.
And you also worked for Celebrity Chef at some point, didn't you not? Or
I worked for many celebrities at different points. I mean, I used to work for Russell Simmons, helping him develop the Tantrist yoga brand, and then I would continue on my career in other events, working for Donald Trump at one point, working for the Hiltons, and I mean, yeah, but you know, I was young and I was chasing that name, right? That fame, where I was like trying to make a name for myself. I'm going to do all these things and trying to find all these external accomplishments to like fill this void in my soul. And I mean, at the end of the day, none of those really mean anything to me because I was miserable.
So what do you do today?
What do I do today? I teach yoga. I'm a Reiki practitioner, which is energy healing. I'm in the midst of developing my spiritual coaching business. I want to be a spiritual mentor and a guide for other people that have suffered through trauma and are having a hard time integrating back into their wholeness.
And where can people find you today?
People can find me on Instagram at The Urban Indigo, and I also have my own podcast where I talk
Yes,
about
you do.
I talk about all of these really deeper issues and exploring so many depths of our being and these mystical realms. It's the Urban Indigo podcast. It's on all platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, and yeah, I mean, as I continue to do the work for myself, my path continues to unfold for me. And so, as much as like I'd love to tell you what I'm doing in 6 months, I don't know who I'm going to be in 6 months.
I don't either. And that's a beautiful thing about change and transformation and growth.
Right.
We don't stay stale. We're open to every possibility.
Absolutely, yeah.
I never imagined, being a businessman for many, many years in my life, an entrepreneur, and here I am doing this today, doing a podcast, talking about recovery, talking about addiction, but it's something that I'm deeply passionate about. And I think that this type of conversations have never had a platform.
Yeah.
They have never, and I am sure, and I am completely convinced that there's going to be some people out there that are going to be listening to this, and they're going to say, "This two are crazy."
Oh yeah.
And that is okay.
My family thinks I'm in a cult.
Yeah, and that is okay.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
The important thing is that you found a journey. You found a journey that kept you sober. You found a journey that gave you life.
Right.
You found a journey that gave you Diana.
Yeah.
And however we find our transformation, however we find our recovery, the most important thing is that we find it, and they we don't stay in that state of mystery.
That dark place.
That dark place.
Right.
There's always possibilities beyond what we have in our present.
Yeah.
If we open our eyes and we open our minds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Diana, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much,
It's
Peter.
been a great pleasure.
Deeply grateful.
You are a jewel. I enjoyed meeting you so much, and thank you for being here. This has been another episode of Come and Clean the Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Follow us in social media, of course, in Instagram at Come and Clean Podcast, and in Facebook at Come and Clean Podcast as well. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.